And
Thank
we now move on to the next talk, a very interesting concept, quite new, and a lot is being talked about it. We are going to be talking about mitochondrial modulators striking at the heart of type 2 diabetes complications. And for this, we have Dr. Makkar. He spoke about mitochondrial flexibility and mitochondrial modulation in a very beautiful talk that he himself gave at the ACCD recently, and we're very eager to listen to this. He has already been introduced, but for people who have logged in for the first time, Dr. Brijmohan Makkar is a leading senior diabetologist and obesity specialist in India. He's from Delhi, and his areas of interest are diabetes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. And he's the founder member of Delhi Diabetic Forum and has been office bearer in various capacities. And he is also a member of the executive board of Diabetes India, and he's a member of the RSSDI and has served in various capacities at the RSSDI. So over to you, Dr. Makkar.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta. Good morning, everyone. Once again, it's pleasure to be at IDEC platform, and thanks for the opportunity. And I am, shall I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is my screen. So I am going to speak on mitochondrial modulators striking at the heart of type 2 diabetes complications. Now I have done a little, tweaking in the title because I think it's too early to talk of modulators. More important is the concept, and that's how I'm going to address this. So I'm talking on mitochondrial modulation, more focus on this rather than the interventions. I don't have any disclosures for this presentation. In this presentation, I'm going to speak about mitochondrial dysfunction and metabolic inflexibility, which is a very important concept that we are learning now. How does metabolic inflexibility lead to type 2 diabetes and also the increased cardiometabolic risk, and where do we see the role of mitochondrial modulators, which is possibly the new emerging area of intervention that we are going to see in next few years. So we have known for more than 3 decades now that type 2 diabetes is caused by two core defects, beta cell dysfunction and insulin resistance, leading to decreased insulin secretion on one hand, increased glucose output from liver, and decreased utilization of glucose from at the level of muscle. Till DiFronzo in 2008 proposed the concept of ominous octet, and he showed that hyperglycemia is caused by not just these two mechanisms, but there are multiple mechanisms contributing to hyperglycemia. The important thing to see here is that out of the 8 proposed mechanisms, 7 act through directly or indirectly through beta cell dysfunction and insulin resistance, except for the glucose reabsorption, which is independent of the insulin axis. Now, all these mechanisms are acting independently, or there is something which is causing this whole ominous octet. So if there is a common mechanism, what is it? What is leading to this ominous octet? So we have known from past studies that there is a complex interaction between genes, epigenetic factors, environmental factors, and lifestyle, bad lifestyle. They all contribute to development of chronic, chronic diseases with increased cardiometabolic risk, and dysglycemia is one of the major components leading to diabetes. Now, how does this all link up? Is it the mitochondrial dysfunction which is leading to all these problems? And that's what we are going to explore in this talk. So at the level of tissues and cells, the basic pathophysiological mechanism is the increased insulin resistance, which basically affects liver, skeletal muscle, and adipose tissue. At first, the pancreas compensates by increasing the insulin production to cover up for insulin resistance, but during the course of disease, it fails and leads to frank hyperglycemia. Now, because of the insulin resistance, what happens is that body acts very differently. Instead of storing and oxidizing glucose and lipids in the fed state, body and body tissues act as if they are still starving because of the insulin resistance, and they keep pouring out glucose and fatty acids into circulation, leading to a substrate overload, which leads to hyperglycemia, ectopic fat accumulation, and worsening of insulin resistance. And if you see this, this is a slide which I picked up from 2005 Medscape page. And if you see this, it clearly shows that obesity and resulting increased free fatty acids lead not only to development of insulin resistance and diabetes down the line, but also contribute to development of dyslipidemia, and hypertension, and ultimately leading to increased cardiovascular risk. And this also is, being proposed as one of the major concepts now, that it is the adiposity based chronic disease model, which suggests that complex intervention between genetics, environmental, and epigenetic factors leads on one side not only to the fat accumulation in a scenario of chronic overnutrition, but also leads to development of insulin resistance, beta cell dysfunction, diabetes, and chronic complications of diabetes on one hand, and on the other side, it leads to development of hypertension, dyslipidemia, and increased cardiovascular risk. So, the concept is clear that pre-diabetes, diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia are closely interlinked. But what is the link? Are they linked because of the disruption of normal energy homeostasis? And we know that normal energy metabolism occurs largely at the level of mitochondria, and mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondria produces ATP by utilizing both glucose and lipid, so free fatty acids. So there is glucose oxidation and lipid oxidation, both happen in mitochondria, and they happen depending on the physiological circumstances of nutrient supply. So in the fed state, there is an increased oxidation of glucose, and the post-absorptive phase, there is increased beta oxidation leading to production of uh, ATP. And this, ability of mitochondria to shift between uh, uh, two different fuels or alternately use different fuels is termed as what is called metabolic flexibility. The normal energy metabolism is characterized by periodic shifts in glucose and fat metabolism, and the mitochondrial machinery has the ability to switch freely between these fuels depending on the physiological and nutritional circumstances. What happens in obesity or the states of chronic overnutrition? There is increasing, these are being increasingly recognized as states where there is loss of metabolic flexibility. When there is excess nutrient overload which is entering the mitochondria, there is a competition between different substrates which are competing for the metabolism, and this leads to what is called as mitochondrial indecision, impaired switching of the fuels depending on the which happens in normal physiological circumstances, and dysregulation of energy production, leading to a state of metabolic inflexibility. So once there is obesity or chronic overnutrition, there is increased supply of nutrients coming to mitochondria. This increased supply happens to be all nutrients. It's not just glucose or lipid. There is overall supply of nutrients which compete for metabolism at the level of mitochondria, causing a gridlock at the level of metabolic processes, and this is a state of metabolic inflexibility. Now, let's see how the glucose and fatty acids are normally metabolized. So, these are the two major sources of production of ATP. What happen, and both these have to enter the TCA cycle ultimately to get into production of ATP. So, what happens in fed state? There is increased glucose entering the mitochondria. There is increased glucose entering the glycolytic cycle, producing acetyl coenzyme A, which enters the TCA cycle and produces ATP. Now, in the whole process, there is this increased acetyl coenzyme A also regulates the decreased entry of fatty acids into mitochondria by increasing the levels of malonyl coenzyme A and citrate. On the other hand, in the fasting state, there is increased supply coming from the free fatty acids, which enter the mitochondria to produce TCA, acetyl coenzyme A, which in turn inhibits the pyruvate dehydrogenase and decreases the entry of glucose. So glucose and fatty acids actually reciprocally inhibit the metabolism or regulate the metabolism of each other. So mitochondria plays a central role in energy metabolism and is responsible for oxidative phosphorylation as well as beta oxidation, and is essential for glucose and lipid metabolism. Now we know mitochondrial dysfunction has long been associated with diabetes as a potential cause of both insulin resistance and beta cell dysfunction, and more recently it is being discussed even in the context of diabetes complications. The important question is whether the insulin resistance causing metabolic inflexibility or it is the vice versa. And one view suggests that blunted glucose oxidation that happens in response to meal supply actually reflects as a consequence of insulin resistance. Now, the current view is that derangements of fuel selection are at least partly independent and may actually precede or contribute to development of insulin resistance. And in healthy state, there is a strong crosstalk between various metabolic pathways through a number of metabolites which act as, the mediators of this crosstalk, like fatty acids, pyruvate, citrate, and malonyl coenzyme A, as I showed in the earlier slide, which in turn regulate the incoming traffic of various fuels. So again, just to enhance the concept, glucose, fatty acids, or branch these amino acids, they all enter the TCA cycle through production of acetyl coenzyme A. So once there is chronic overnutrition, there are substrates entering through all pathways, and this leads to increased production of acetyl coenzyme A, which all of which now cannot enter the TCA cycle for production of NADH. So acetyl coenzyme A enters the alternate pathways, leading to production of the free radicals and causing damage. At the same time, more NADH is being produced that can be utilized by the mitochondria. So NADH also leads to increased production of free radicals and damage. So this is the electron transport chain in mitochondria, which shows that once there is increased production of NADH, it donates electrons to the electron transport complex 1, which leads to increased transfer happening across the electron transport chain, leading to a grid block at the level of ETC3. As a result, there is a backup of electrons on coenzyme QA, which donates electron to the molecular oxygen, leading to production of the superoxide radicals. And studies have clearly shown that there is increased mitochondrial electrochemical potential if it is exposed to the hyperglycemia. So the current view, developing current view is the transitions between the highly insulin and highly insulin sensitive and resistant states appear to operate as a continuum. And this is a function of demand and supply of ATP. If you have more fuel entering the mitochondria, there is a grid block leading to development of insulin resistance, and this possibly is a mechanism to decrease the uptake of glucose or nutrients into mitochondria. Now, how does this inflexibility lead to beta cell dysfunction? So in the causing of beta cell dysfunction, there is an important role of FOXO, which is a family of insulin responsive transcription factors and play an important role in mediating the insulin actions by regulating gene expression and downstream effects. Main function of FOXO is to enable metabolic flexibility. It has other function. It integrates energy intake and energy expenditure at the level of CNS, regulates hepatic glucose and lipid production, regulates free fatty acid turnover at the level of adipocytes, and maintains normal endothelial function. In addition, FOXO also carries out very distinct function of maintaining a normal tissue differentiation and maintaining the lineage stability. That means the beta cell will function as beta cell and alpha cell will keep functioning as alpha cell. So once there is derangement of FOXO, these lineages will also change and there can be de-differentiation of different cells. So what happens is in the post-absorptive state, the FOXO lies in the nucleus and regulates gene expression. Once there is increased supply of calories, there is a phosphorylation media of FOXO, and it gets excluded from the nucleus and lies quietly in the cytoplasm. But once there is need for increased insulin, That means once there is chronic overnutrition, there is increased supply for insulin. FOXO again migrates to nucleus and enforces the expression of MODY associated genes like HNF alpha, HNF alpha F4 or F1, and also genes like PDX1, which are important for maintaining the beta cell uh, lineage stability. And this results in improvement of the insulin secretion and more utilization of glucose in an attempt to overcome the degree of insulin resistance. But if the chronic overnutrition is going on for a long duration of time, this FOXO gets exhausted and it stops functioning. As a result, the expression of MODY related genes also decreases, and there is increased expression of PPAR alpha, leading to increased utilization of free fatty acids as and increased beta oxidation at the level of mitochondria. There is also increased PPAR gamma, which is perceived or interpreted as an attempt by beta cell to to divert carbon molecules entering the mitochondria to the fat cells so that there is decreased damage to mitochondria. So in nutshell, in a healthy cell, the FOXO is intact, functions normally. Once there is metabolic inflexibility, once there is increased nutrient supply, there is increased expression of increased activity of FOXO at nuclear level, leading to on one side expression of genes which are involved in development of diabetes, and on the other side also expression of genes which maintain the beta cell lineage stability. But in due course, if the chronic overnutrition doesn't stop, the FOXO gets exhausted. As a result, there is increased, insulin resistance, and there is expression of genes which are more involved for de-differentiation or development of features of progenitor cells at the level of beta cells, and there is decreased expression of genes like PDX1, which are important for maintaining lineage stability. So as a result, the beta cells start losing their normal character. They start de-differentiating or trans-differentiating towards alpha cell features and ultimately towards null cells. So this leads to beta cell dysfunction. Now, how does metabolic inflexibility lead to the damage to or the target organ damage? And we know these are the pathways of which mediate the chronic complications. The final pathway is the development of oxidative stress, and I have shown you that once there is metabolic inflexibility, there is increased production of free radicals, and this is the unifying pathway. So once there is hyperglycemia, it leads to increased production of free radicals, which damages the DNA at the nuclear level, and this activates enzyme called PARP, which decreases the activity of GAP dehydrogenase enzyme. Now, GAP dehydrogenase enzyme is the rate limiting enzyme for glycolytic pathway. Once there is decreased activity of GAP dehydrogenase, there is increased accumulation of intermediates of glycolytic pathway, which enter the alternate pathways of metabolism, leading to increased production of damaging substances like activation of PKC and production of AGEs, leading to the target organ damage. So in nutshell, overloaded free fatty acids and dysglycemia lead to damaging actions to mitochondria, leading to mitochondrial dysfunction. These damaging pathways proposed are the mutations, the mitochondrial biogenesis is decreased, and there is aging of mitochondria, and this all results in increased production of free radicals and damage, development of diabetes and complications. So there is undeniable link between insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes on other one hand and mitochondrial dysfunction on the other hand. Now, can we correct this mitochondrial inflexibility? So since the mitochondrial dysfunction is present in different tissues and contributes to diabetes, pathogenesis and complications in a number of ways, the therapeutic intervention which targets mitochondria will actually be a very interesting option for managing diabetes and its complications. That's where the concept of mitochondrial modulators is emerging. So mitochondrial modulators are drugs that benefit patients by novel mechanisms that would make the system, tissue or organ function more efficiently by normalizing what is called metabolic flexibility. We know that as cellular energy hubs, mitochondria allow metabolic switching between normal, different fuels. And this is the normal metabolism. Mitochondrial modulation of glucose and lipid substrate improves insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance in pancreas, liver, and skeletal muscle. And consequently, mitochondria are being identified as the key players in development of diabetes. And if we intervene and improve the mitochondrial flexibility, normalize mitochondrial function, then possibly we will be able to address multiple things. We also know that fatty acids, are not very efficient fuels, and fatty acid oxidation requires more oxygen per molecule for production of molecule of ATP. So if we have agents which increase, glucose oxidative phosphorylation, or decrease beta oxidation of lipids, or increase the efficiency of fatty acid metabolism, this can lead to improved mitochondrial function. This is also being considered. So this is like using two different fuels in a hybrid car. You are using one fuel for the rapid power, which is like glucose, and there is another fuel which is improving the efficiency of the whole machine, which is coming from the glucose sparing efficiency, leading coming from the fat metabolism. Now, if to run the car, you need the actually very right mix of these two fuels, and the engine has to be flexible in using the fuel so that as to maintain efficiency. So once there is loss of this flexibility, this leads to the breakdown of the whole system. Now, how does mitochondrial dysfunction happen? There can be changes in the mitochondrial DNA, and there are studies which have shown that there are mutations at DNA level that cause mitochondrial dysfunction. There can be swelling of mitochondria because of intracellular accumulation of free fatty acids, diacylglycerol, long chain fatty acids, and free radicals. And this, they can lead to mitochondrial swelling. There can be disruption of the electron transfer along the electron transport chain, and leading to increased production of free radicals, and gridlock, decreasing the ATP production. We have studies in new detected diabetes where it is shown that if you compare the individuals with normal body mass index with the individuals who have increased body mass index, there is increased demethylation of the mitochondrial proteins, leading to mitochondrial damage. Now, how do we improve the mitochondrial function? There are a number of mechanisms which are being considered, and there are a number of molecular pathways which are being considered to improve the mitochondrial function. And some of these are the NAD boosting molecules, the mitochondrial membrane property modulators, STACs, or certain 1 activating compounds, OXPHOS or oxidative phosphorylation modulators, AMP kinase activators, PPAR gamma agonists, antioxidants, mitochondrial pyruvate carriers, and so on. And the target is to normalize mitochondrial function to make it more efficient. So what mitochondrial modulators will do is they correct mitochondrial metabolic function, directly correcting metabolic effects in liver, pancreas, and skeletal muscle to prevent oxidative stress and insulin resistance, and directly improve energy efficiency and expenditure to prevent or control cardiovascular risk. So coming back to the concept of dysglycemia based chronic disease model and metabolic flexibility. So the emerging understanding is that genes, epigenetic factors, environmental and lifestyle, they all interact in a very complex way, leading to development of metabolic dysfunction. And this is also, further enhanced by a predisposition for or intrinsic susceptibility to develop this dysfunction and the chronic nutrient access. Once there is metabolic inflexibility, there is increased production of free radicals, which on one side leads to development of insulin resistance and beta cell dysfunction. On the other side, leads to development of chronic complications. And possibly with the development of mitochondrial modulators, we will be able to normalize this metabolic or mitochondrial inflexibility, normalize the mitochondrial dysfunction, and improve the whole outcome. So to sum up my presentation, metabolic flexibility is the mitochondrial ability to efficiently switch between glucose and lipid metabolism. Um, FOXO1 plays a very crucial role in maintaining the metabolic flexibility and also maintaining the lineage stability of beta cells. Caloric excess and resulting metabolic inflexibility plays important role in development of insulin resistance, beta cell dysfunction, as well as complications. And correcting mitochondrial dysfunction and restoration of metabolic flexibility is emerging as a promising approach for management of dysglycemia-based chronic diseases and prevention of diabetes complications. So with this, I come to end of my presentation. I hope I have been able to finish in
Yes.
time.
Thank
Just in
you.
time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so very much for making such a difficult topic seem so very simple. I just had one question. Do you see mitochondrial modulators, if they ever come in, do you see them emerging as therapy for NAFLD, number one? And secondly, do you see that they will reduce the rate of beta cell apoptosis?
So very important. See, one is if they are coming, yes, the mitochondrial modulators are very much on the way, and that
Yes.
is why the discussions have started.
Yes,
Otherwise,
yes.
nobody would bother to discuss all these
I
things.
know, I know.
Second thing is the answer is yes for everything that you have asked.
Okay.
They are going to improve the metabolism of both free fatty acids and glucose in a way that it becomes more efficient. So there is going to be a decrease, ectopic lipid accumulation, which will help in reducing the NFLD. And of course, if you are able to maintain normal FOXO activity and normal beta cell lineage, then you will maintain the normoglycemia. And if you remember the presentation even from Roy Taylor, the latest presentation he made at ADA, he showed that if you are trying to reverse diabetes, you have to intervene early. What happens is, as the disease progresses, the FOXO gets exhausted. So you have activation of genes which lead to transdifferentiation of beta cells to alpha cells under the influence of ARX and decrease activity of PDX1. And if you allow this to continue for some time, there is further dedifferentiation moving on to the null cell level.
Right.
So once the beta cell becomes a null cell, you can't make it shift back to beta cell. And so if you give a longer duration of disease, then the chances of remission are less. But if you intervene early, maybe even at the level of transdifferentiation to beta cell, you are able to revert this back.
Right.
So all these are very interesting concepts. So let us see how much will happen in our lifetime. But there will be exciting things happening.
Right. Yes, very, very nice. So thank you so much. Yeah, Dr. Makkar.